Oh, okay. I thought you were going to stand there and hold it for me. Thank you. Okay. Sorry, we've had mic issues, and so I'm on this one. There we go. All right. Good morning, everybody. We are starting a series in Job. Jeff, our lead pastor, he's away on his long service leave with his wife Laura, and so we're leaning into other preachers and speakers, and Jeff and I have been talking about Job for a while as a possible book that I could do some teaching out of, and we decided to eat up some Sundays with a series of Job, but hopefully it doesn't feel like we're just filler. I find the book of Job to be a really fascinating book. I read it a lot growing up at different times. Usually read the first 2 chapters and then skip a whole bunch in the middle there and then read the last little bit, maybe some of the stuff in God that God says. But hopefully over the next 3 weeks we can get a better idea of what's happening. I recently have come back to the book of Job in my own personal Bible study, and we'll talk more of that in 2 weeks. Let's go to the next slide. So just a setting in Job. Job is a story that many people are familiar with, even people who don't necessarily come to church a whole lot. Job is one of the stories that kind of gets pulled out of the Bible. It has a greater resonance, even if a lot of people don't really understand what's happening there. Even if it doesn't really make sense. There's aspects of Job's story that at any point in time we can identify with. The suffering of Job was extreme, and we can identify with that at different times in our own life story. And so Job kind of comes up a lot in the cultural context. If you look at the Wikipedia page and scroll down to the cultural influences, you'll find all kinds of books and movies and really fancy French films that are based on Job that you've never seen before. But it has this cultural resonance with us. So Job opens and closes with what we call a narrative frame, and those are the 2 boxes on the end, the darker green. And a narrative frame is those bits are actually in Hebrew, they're narrative, as opposed to the middle bits, the green, the vast majority of the book, which is poetry. And if you open your Bibles, you can see the difference because the narrative bits take up the full page or the full width of your screen or whatever you're doing. But the poetry bits will be clumped in lines, little clusters of lines, which makes the book of Job look even longer because it takes up so much space in the poetry. And so Job is a story that most of us have some familiarity with. We're opened with Job. We're told he's a good guy. Something happens in heaven, whatever that is. Lots of bad stuff happened to Job. Some more bad stuff happens to Job. And then he and his friends just talk for a really, really long time. And that's all in poetry. And then God comes and doesn't really seem to engage at all with anything that's happened so far in the book. And then all's well. Job seems to be impacted by what God has to say, and then Job gets everything back plus a little bit. And that's the book. And so we're going to unpack that over the last 3 weeks. But at its heart, the book of Job is a story about a man's experience and how in that experience, God met him in a surprising way that most of us wouldn't have picked, but that's the way God picked. And he learned something new about God. He came out of that experience with something new. And that is something that we can learn from by looking at this story. And we'll do that over the next 3 weeks. We'll look at the story and try and figure out what's happening to Job. Why is it happening? What in the world are he and his friends talking about for 40 chapters? What is God doing there at the end? And then the closing. What's happening here? We'll do that. But it's also, this story is also an invitation to look at our own lives. And maybe your experience doesn't quite reach Job levels. Your suffering, the things that have happened to you. But we all have had experiences, maybe positive, maybe negative, where God has met us and made that relationship a little bit deeper or a little bit more complicated, and we've come to love God a little bit more through those experiences. And so this is also an invitation for you to be remembering those experiences, or for you to be looking at your own life. And so as a part of that as well, I want to invite some people to come up and tell their story about how God met them in their experience, which is an encouragement for all of us to do the same. So today I'm going to ask JC to come up and share a story of how some experiences in his life have God has met him there. JC is one of our pastoral leaders. You see his picture on the thing, and you see him at the front door, but you don't ever see him up here. So this is a chance for JC to come and share a little bit of his story.
Thanks, Brian. Hi, everyone. Firstly, I want to say congratulations to Kate and Michael for their wedding. But yes, I'm JC, and you will call me Mr. JC, Charles Miller, and the other numerous students that I have here as well. I am a teacher by day, and so it's good to know that I have some students here who keep me on check as well. Anyway, I was quite excited when Brian approached me to share part of my story and my experience, particularly because one of the verses in Job has been a very anchoring verse for me in life, and so I was quite excited to be able to bring this to you. Now, before I get started, I just want to say that my story is nothing special, and all of us have a story. All of us have great stories. It's not, mine isn't better than yours, or I'm any better than you in that sense. So the hope is that as I share, that you'll remember less of my story, but more of how God's intertwined in that story, and how His word, His promises, and Him are very real to me, and obviously, hopefully to you as well in that experience. And so I'm going to try my best not to take too much of time from Brian's series, but I want to start with my one of my verses, which is quite popular and quite common to people. It's taken from Jeremiah 29:11. You might see it on the slide there. And what you will see is that every section of my story that I share with you, I have kind of linked it with a verse that's very important to me as well. And you won't see the exact wording of any version of the Bible there, but what you will see is a summary of what I have hooked onto in terms of my relationship with God. Of course, it has been a long time coming. I know I look like I'm 16, but I'm actually 40 plus, which is, yeah. Anyway, my wife cooks really good food, so that's the secret anyway. And so yeah, you can see up there, the plans God has for me are so much better than I could ever plan for myself or think for myself. But nonetheless, I do it. I still plan, and sometimes put God on the side and go, nah, this is the way I want it. But often I realize that His is better. And so I've learned over the years and through experiences that it's good to trust His plans better than. And I'm going to set some context, and if you can follow through and not fall asleep like my students do in class, it'll really look like a Academy Award winning, Oscar winning story, okay? That's the pitch. So my next slide has some timelines on there. Now, I'm originally from Fiji, and I was married in 2009. I was in Fiji back then. And in 2010 at Kent State High School here, which I had no idea existed. I don't even know Cairns existed. When somebody said I'm going to Cairns, I thought those the Cairns Film Festival. Do you know? I don't even know where that is, but I thought somewhere there. And I was so far removed from Australia. Australia wasn't even in my thoughts anywhere close. But Kent State High School, which is a school on Sheridan Street, had started an IB program. Of course, I didn't know this. In 2010, no idea. I was newly married. We had our first child. Jane was born in 2010, and life was good. We were kind of very happy with the little family that we had, and we were kind of living our life in this small island nation that is very, very small. And in 2013, I met an Australian I met a lot of Australians that year actually, because I took a job at an international school which had a lot of expatriate Australians teaching in Fiji as well. And I met this man named Luke Fuller, and he became a good friend of mine. He was from New South Wales. I want to say he's a big Sharks fan, and he introduced me to the game of rugby, which is similar to, I guess, American football, but much more gutsy people play that game. Not the American football game, because you got to be padded up and gritted and stuff like that. So, it's not a game. Anyway, and so I met Luke, and our short time that we were knowing each other, he later then in 2015 moved back to Australia, and I kind of lost touch with him for a while. And you'll see in my story, he comes back, makes a appearance again. And in 2017, I moved to Australia. And so I want to begin my story around the time before I just moved to Australia and what happened when I initially first moved to Australia. I want to share that portion of my experience, which has left a lasting change in my faith, I believe. So on the next slide, thank you. I share this section under this verse. It's taken from Psalms 139, particularly verse 2 and 5. He knows my thoughts before I even think them. He cares deeply about me. So there's this assurance I've now have that if nobody else cares, God really cares. And it's not just something I say, it's very tangible to me to know that I'll be looked after, even if it's the worst of circumstances. And so before I moved to Australia in 2016, mid-2016, I had a change of heart. I was teaching in that IB school, which is the International Baccalaureate, which is a kind of like a global, very academic, very rigorous type of high school course. Some people might be aware of it. And I kind of really liked that. I loved it. And I said, like, this is what I want. I want to work for the IB. I want to teach the IB. And that became my kind of career goal to pursue. And so in the middle of 2016, I had a bit of change. I said, I'll go back to uni. I'll study a bit. And, I'm going to apply to go work where there's more IB stuff happening. And so I started applying to Singapore, to UK, to Germany, and to China as well. But as I was applying, every time I would be met with, sorry, you didn't make it. It didn't even go to any further processes, just dead stop now. But later I found out that one of the reasons was because I was not Western trained. And so because I had only received my education in Fiji and all my training in Fiji, it's not quite at the level where you'd want it to be, I suppose. But anyway, at that point when I was applying, never thought about Australia, never was interested, it didn't cross my mind. It didn't have much people over here that, I had traveled through here a couple of times, but Australia was not on my mind. Not that anything was wrong with Australia, but at that time I thought, if any chance I had, I would have moved to America. Because back then they were great. And since 2016, of course, they are in the process of being great, I suppose. And jokes aside, my parents are in the States, and my brothers are in the States as well. So I thought that might be the place I might end up, if anything. And of course, so, I have got nothing against the States, unlike a fellow American who has something against us Australians here. I think his name is Brian Phoenix, so Brian, Pennsylvania, maybe, I'm not sure. So, and so as I was applying, one of the agents took mercy on me and said, hey, look, you're not going to get any job here. Why don't I push your CV to an agent in Australia, and there might be some hope there for you. And at that point, I was like, well, okay, why not? I've got nothing to lose at this stage, so they push it forward. It starts, a process gets started. I get contacted by an agent. They say, all right, look, your CV looks impressive enough. We'll get you started. We'll do a few interviews, all these kind of things. And so I'm filling in documents, sending emails, and blah, blah, blah. And it comes to a point in October of 2016 when it stops. And I'm like, what's happening? I'm emailing the agent, say, could you tell me what's happening? I really want to know if I'm moving to Australia in the beginning of January or what, so I can get ready, I can prepare my family, I can, get ready in terms of making the transition, and nothing. And so what was happening back then was they had actually given me a job, and the job was going to start in July of 2017, and it would be in a remote school up far north Queensland, so past Cairns, as I understand it. And I didn't know that, and so they were like, blasé about it. It's going to be a while, 6 months time we can get him over, and so it's all good. Whereas I was like, what's happening? What I got to do? I got to make changes and stuff like that. And so God knew my heart back then, because I was so interested, as I said to you, in the IB program. And later I found out currently the furthest IB school up north is Townsville Grammar. But when I was moving, and this may not sound much to you guys, but public schools don't run the IB program because it's an expensive program to run. You got to pay a fees of about $25,000 or something a year to be able to take that program. But as I said, in 2010, I'd like to think God started a motion just for me. He set up a school here in Cairns that ran the IB program starting in 2010. And so by the time December rolled out, they said to me, look, something's happened. The school we wanted to send you to, the teacher who had left had suddenly decided to come back and take back their position, so we didn't have any place for you. And so, I don't know what. They said, look, there is another school that we'd like to send you, but you'll have to start in January if you get here. And lo and behold, I said, yes, I will take it. When I got here, it was an IB school, something that I really wanted to be part of. And I was just very excited that God actually knew that that's what I wanted. Yeah. Next slide, thank you. And so, in that moment, I was like, look, from far off, He knows me. He knew my thoughts. And He'd given me something that I really desired, and that happened for me. And so I was very happy, very excited. This is good. This is great. God's got me. All things are working out. I'm really gonna, do well, and everything's gonna be fine. And this is way up, moving up. But when I got here, and I share this verse with you. When I got here, after a few experiences in the first few weeks of being in Australia, I found that that I am very important to God, and He's able to take care of me, and He's able to make every favor and grace that I need abound towards me, and that really touched my heart. And so when I got here, with the limited amount of money that I had, I tried to book us a spot at the Rainbow Resort, which is on Sheridan Street. Now on the website it looked really nice, looked like a 5-star hotel. And some of you will share their experience, but when I got here, it wasn't that. But I was like, look, it's across the road is the school, and we're good here. We'll just put up here. What's the worst could happen? In a week's time, we'll get a rental place, and we'll be moved out, and our lives will begin, and we'll be all jolly good. And so I didn't have a car. I didn't know anyone in Cairns. I had no family. The department people who brought me over had one induction done, and they all went back to Brisbane. And I'm like, okay, wait till the school opens. So I got here on the 10th of January, and then I had to start on the 19th of January. And so I said, oh, look, while we put up, I'll try and start looking for rental spaces. Of course, knowing nothing about how that worked here in Australia. I had no car. I couldn't get a car because I couldn't get a loan, because I didn't have a permanent job. And I find all these out when I'm talking to people and get doors shut down in my face. And so I walked from perhaps Sheridan Street all the way to Portsmouth, and all the way to further Sheridan Street on this side, whichever side that is. And I'm walking to rental open homes, and I'm saying, hey, look, I'm ready to pay the bond, give me the apartment or whatever. And they say, sorry, that's not how it works here. You got to fill a form, you got to have referees. And I'm like, nobody knows me here. Nobody's going to give me a referee. And so I started filling forms and put names of people who were back in Fiji who knew me, obviously. And so they didn't bother contact one. And so every single application, I must have made about 20 or 30 applications, never heard back from anyone. And so I'm walking from 10th of January, walking every day, trying to go see something I could get. Nothing. And 19th of January comes around, I'm back at work, got no rental space, no car, and I'm running out of money. And by the 19th, I was almost gonna only last the weekend, and all my money would have been finished, the money that I had on me. And so I went to school on the 19th of January, and on the 20th of January, I think we had a staff PD, so heard nothing on the 19th. And on the 20th of January, we're sitting in a circle, and I'm sharing, and they asked us to share a bit of, personality with them. And so I shared Christ. Of course, I realized nobody in that circle believed in Christ. But I shared anyway. And what had happened earlier that week, my last place I went to kind of look for a rental space, which was on Martin Street, the Martin Retreat Apartments. And as I ran into to make the cut to the open home, one of the persons was picking up the signs and closing down, and said, and they were going to pack up and go. And I said, look, I've just gotten here. Sorry, I've been walking all over the place. Can I just go and have a see? And the gentleman said, oh yeah, sure, okay, you could go in. And he directed me where to go. I went in, came out, and I did apply to that place before I went back to school. And again, I had no hope, didn't hear anything from that until Friday when I was sitting in that circle. And as I shared a bit about my faith and a bit about Christ and how I got to Australia, my phone rings, and I was told that, yep, you will get that Martin Street apartment building. And I was like, I was the last person walking in. It's probably going to be, yeah, let's just get over and done with this last person. And I realized the person I met on the outside was actually the owner. And God must have touched his heart in an instant in which I just said hello to him, for him to go, and you know what, I'm going to give the apartment to this guy. And later he did tell me that, that's how he felt. He said, look, I just wanted to give you the apartment. I don't know why, but and he did. So unfortunately, it was Friday. I couldn't do anything in the weekend because all the offices are closed. So they said, oh, you got to just put up wherever you put up, and you got to come and see us on Monday, and then you'll have it. And so Monday, and this is the day which I'm kind of aiming at what happens on Monday. And so I extend the stay at Rainbow Resort. I'm out of money, pretty much. I might have just had enough to do a taxi fare. And so Monday afternoon after school, I quickly go and get the keys from Ray White in the city. And I come back home, and we're trying to pack everything up, get a taxi. And while we're trying to pack, some creepy people come along, and one of our bags gets stolen. But at that time we don't realize. But anyway, we loaded everything up, and we go and we get dropped off. As we're going in the taxi, and this taxi driver I've never met, don't know, nothing. And as I was sharing with him a bit about, I wish I get a car, and it could be easy for us to get around. My wife at that time was 3 months pregnant as well. And so as we're getting off the taxi driver says, you know what, take this number, this is my wife's number, and she will be more than happy. She did not ask his wife, and men know, you should ask your wife first. Okay. And he said, just take this number, give her a call, and she'll be more than happy to come and help you for whatever you need. And of course, I had to be at work. Sherin had to take Jane to school and back, and her pregnancy appointments and all that kind of stuff happening. So anyway, that was really good. This lady was amazing. When she finally got in touch with Sherin, she was like, it was her life's mission to take Sherin wherever she wanted to go, whatever she wanted to buy, she'd just take her. She said, I want to go to Big W. Is there a Big W? And she, there was a Big W. We went to that. And Sherin wanted to go to the beach. She would take her to the beach. School drop-offs early in the morning, and all sorts of things that she did. So she was just like, no, I'm here to serve you. Don't know the person, never met, no contact. Why? No idea. And so Monday, as we go into the apartment, it's about 7 in the night, and we put everything down, and we're just standing around the counter, the kitchen counter. And Jane's hungry, Sherin's hungry, I'm hungry obviously, but I'm least worried about that. And we look at each other and we go, well, we've got no money, we got no food, we just moved into this apartment. And at that moment, as a dad and as a husband, as a person who's supposed to lead your family, I realized there's nothing I could do. I couldn't call anyone to ask for money. I knew no one. And so Luke comes to mind after about 2 years or so, a guy I met in Fiji. And I said, look, I have his number, maybe I give him a try. And I call him up and said, look, hey mate, I'm really sorry to bother you, but I need money. And that can be an embarrassing thing to do for a man. And so And he said, look, I'm not going to give you any money. I'm like, "Ah." He was the last hope. He was the only hope I had to get money. But then he explained, he said, look, if I give you any money, it'll take 24 hours for it to clear. And these are the systems in Australia, of course. That's what happens. And somebody new giving you money will not come in right away. And she said, here's the best thing I can do for you is I'm going to give you a Domino's voucher. I said, what's Domino's? Later I found it's the best pizza that is found in Australia, of course. So he said, I'm going to give you a $30 Domino's voucher. And I said, oh, that's more than enough. I can do that. He said, you'll have to go find the nearest place. He sent me the code on the phone and just show them and get as much pizza as you can for $30. So I went to Domino's. I walked again, middle of the night. I walked to Domino's, and I'm like, because I'm a math teacher, I should be able to do this properly. And so I said, how many pizzas can I fit in the $30? And as much as I can, so that it lasts us for dinner, perhaps for lunch tomorrow as well. And so I kind of look, and luckily Domino's has these $7 pizzas or, cheap $5 pizzas or something like that. So I gather as many as I can. About 5 or 4 pizzas I gathered, brought all the boxes back. We had dinner. We had dinner that day. And I realized that all these favors that we're running, God must have had something to do with it. Because there was just too many coincidence to be counted that day. Tuesday I go back to work. I shared a bit of my story with some of the staff, and one lovely couple said, you know what, we'll take you home. We'll take you to buy stuff that you need for your apartment. We'll help you buy food. Obviously I didn't have a car. And in that moment, I really realized that God is still looking out for me. Now, often people might say, well, if he is looking out for you, why isn't he, made it all rosy, all just walk the water? Why are there some waves around that, kind of knock you about as well? But I kept trusting. And after that little episode, I've never gone back. I've said, no matter what the situation becomes, I can be very, very much reliant on God to take care of me. And so I finish with this one, this next slide, which has the verse that I've loved for a very long time, even before this all happened. And in Job finally says to his friends that even if God is the one that kills him, slays is the word used in some versions, that he trusts him so much that he will still trust him even if even God stands against him. And Job had realized that after all this commentary with his friends as well. And so this experience in life, as it might not mean much to many people, but to me is the one thing that I can anchor on, that all else could fail. They say you shouldn't cry when you're public speaking. All else could fail, but God still got me. And so my faith now stands at a point there that, you could not get me off God. That's where I am. So thank you for listening. And that's a little bit of my story.
Thank you. Thank you, JC. The stories that we find in the Bible are really important, and it's important that we take time to study them and look at them. But the story of your own life and the story of the people that are in this community are also important and a part of building our faith as we walk this walk together. Let's go to the next slide. I want to do a quick, just so everybody knows what we're doing here. So we've got 3 Sundays in a row. Today is meant to be an introduction to the story. Tonight at 5 o'clock, back in that building, we're going to spend time on the throne room scene. What in the world is going on there? So if that's ever been a question to you, if you've ever read that chapter or that little bit and said, what? Then hopefully I can at least provide a few possible explanations. I don't plan on trying to answer exactly what it is, because there's a few different explanations. And so I'll present those as best I can and hopefully give you something more to chew on. Next week, we're going to do the debate next Sunday. And that'll be the long sign. What in the world's going on there? And then that night, we'll look at Hebrew poetry, specifically in Job. And then on the last May 11th, Mother's Day, the best Mother's Day sermon you can give, the God speeches in Job. is what we'll do for that. I did not set the schedule. You can send an email to Jeff, and he'll get around to it when he's gets off of long service leave. And then that night at 5 o'clock is our mission prayer time, so there will be nothing about Job there, but please come along and be a part of that. So let's go ahead and skip to Job chapter 1. If you could pull that up for me. Job 1:1. So a lot of people, when we come to the book of Job, one of the first questions we like to ask as good Westerners is it true? Did it happen? And my answer is always, yes, the book of Job is true. It is potentially one of the most important books that you could read because it has so much truth in it. But then on the follow-up question, well, did it happen? I don't know. Because the book of Job, it's not to relate a true story. The purpose of the book of Job is not to just tell us a story so we can say, oh, wow, that's interesting. The book of Job is there to teach us. That's why it's always in the wisdom literature. You don't find it smack dab in between 1 Kings and 2 Kings that's just kind of going through what happened in the history of Israel, of the Israelites. You find it with Psalms and Proverbs. And so would you ask, is the book of Psalms true? Well, yeah. Did it happen? It's a book of poetry, man. Well, that's kind of what the book of Job is. The book of Job is a book of poetry. So can we pull up chapter 1, verse 1? Do you have that one? Go ahead and skip through that. Skip. There we go. Okay. A man there was in the land of Uz. This is a fun book here. This is a translation that none of you have, and it is by a Hebrew scholar. And he has done a ton of work to try and retain the beauty of the Hebrew that we lose in translation. So we get really fun things like a man there was in the land of Uz. Job his name. The man was blameless and upright and feared God and shunned evil. And 7 sons were born to him and 3 daughters. And his flocks came to 7,000 sheep and 3,000 camels and 500 yokes of cattle and 500 she-asses and a great abundance of slaves. And that man was greater than all the Easterners. So we have this land of Uz, and we don't know where that is. It's meant to be kind of, a long time ago in a land far away type opening. But most people think, it's meant to evoke for the Israelites east of Israel. Job is not an Israelite. This is critical to the story. Job is not an Israelite. But he has a very interesting amount of stuff. He's got a lot of 3s and a lot of 7s and a lot of 5s, and if you add it all up, it's a lot of 10s. Those are all very important numbers to the Hebrew language, and they all connect in one way or another to abundance or to completeness. So either there was this guy, probably meant to be set in the time of Abraham, who had the perfect amount of stuff and the perfect distribution of stuff, or there's something more going on here. Let's go to the next. Let's skip that. Oh, yeah, no. Go back. Sorry. Okay, so we continue on. And the sons would go and hold their feast, and they no, where am I at? I'm sorry. Chapter 2. I'm sorry. I'm cutting stuff here. Okay, so 1:13, that's where I'm at. And one day his sons and daughters were eating and drinking wine in the house of their brother, the firstborn. And a messenger came to Job and said, the cattle were plowing, the she-asses grazing by them, and the Sabaeans fell upon them and took them. And the lads were struck down by the edge of the sword, and I alone escaped to tell you. This one was still speaking when another came. God's fire fell from the heavens and burned among the sheep and the lads and consumed them, and I alone escaped to tell you. This one was still speaking when another one came and said, the Chaldeans set out in 3 bands and pounced upon the camels and took them. And the lads they struck down by the edge of the sword. This one was still speaking when another one came. Your sons and your daughters were eating and drinking wine in the house of their brother, the firstborn. And look, a great wind came from beyond the wilderness and struck the 4 corners of the house. And it fell on the young people, and they died. And I alone escaped to tell you. So in one day, in one moment, in just a few hours, Job loses everything. And if you look at it, there's a bit of a pattern to these 4 events. First, he loses everything in the exact opposite order of how we were reported about it just a minute ago. Second, the first and the third are human origin, and the second and the fourth are God origin, at least from the minds of the Hebrews. Anything that's natural disaster type, that's an act of God type thing. So in the eyes of the Hebrews, an insurance act of God. The first, the Sabaeans, are in Arabia, so they come from the south. The second, God's fire, which is lightning, comes from a great storm, and the storms blow in from the west, from the Mediterranean. Then the Chaldeans come. The Chaldeans are over in the Iranian Peninsula. Guess where they come from? The north. And then the wind comes, and these great winds blow out of the desert from the east. So either this guy lost everything in a few moments, including a storm blowing in from the west and a big wind blowing in from the east, and he lost everything from every compass point on the map, or there's something more going on here. And I'm okay if this isn't a true story. Maybe there was a guy named Job, and he had a lot of bad things happen to him. And our author took that story and made it a fun story, made it more interesting, made it sure that he had the completeness of everything, made sure that his loss was so complete that it punched a little bit more. If that's a problem for you, then think of it the same way we think of the parables. When Jesus tells a story about a guy who gets jumped on the road to Jericho, he's not reporting something that happened yesterday. He's not saying, yeah, there's a guy got jumped on the road, so I was like, oh, wow. Oh, and a Samaritan? Ooh, wow, weird. He's telling a story. He's crafting a story specifically to the point he's trying to make. And the author of Job is doing the same thing. And he's possibly building it on a kernel of a story that the Hebrews knew, or maybe he's making the whole thing up. Because the point of Job is not found in chapter 1 and 2. That's called the introduction, right? The point of Job is that big chuck in the middle that I always skipped because it's too complicated. That's the point of Job, and we're going to get to that next week. So a lot of bad things happened to Job. We all know that. Let's jump to chapter 3. If you're interested about, what happens, why do these bad things happen, come over tonight, and we'll take quite a long time to just go through bit by bit the Job story, but then also other parts of the Bible that'll speak into that. But the book of Job is in the Bible for a reason. If you read through the Bible cover to cover, the book of Job will stand out. It'll make you stop and say, what's going on here? Because the rest of the Bible, especially the Old Testament, the rest of the Old Testament, especially when you get through Genesis and you get into Deuteronomy and you get to Judges and Joshua and the Kings, when people do good things happen. And when people do bad things happen. And God actually says that a lot. And it makes for a very simple moral universe. But then comes along some stories that say, well, wait a minute. We're living life, and life doesn't seem that simple. And we get a few of the Psalms that say, why do the wicked prosper when the righteous are stomped down? And then we get Job standing up to say, no. Things are way more gray than this. So Job has all these bad things happen. He loses everything. He's got the skin diseases and all that. He sits in silence, and his friends come, and they sit for 7 days. And it tells us that Job doesn't sin with his mouth, which is an interesting detail, because maybe he's thinking something. Not quite ready to say it, but maybe he's starting to think some things. And then all of a sudden, Job opens up. And I want to read this full chapter 3. Afterward, Job opened his mouth and cursed his day, that's his birthday. And Job spoke up and he said, annul the day that I was born and the night that said a man is conceived. Let that day, let it be darkness. Let God above not seek it out, nor brightness shine upon it. Let darkness, death's shadows foul it. Let a cloud mass rest upon it. Let day gloom dismay it. That night, let murk overtake it. Let it not join in the days of the year. Let it not enter the number of months. Oh, let that night be barren. Let it have no song of joy. Let the day cursers hex it, those ready to rouse Leviathan. Let its twilight stars go dark. Let it hope for day in vain, and let not it see the eyelids of dawn. For it did not shut the belly's doors, nor hide wretchedness from my eyes. Why did I not die from the womb? From the belly come out, breathe my last. Why did knees welcome me, and why breasts that I should suck? For now I would lie and be still, would sleep in no repose, with kings and the counselors of earth who build ruins for themselves, or with princes, possessors of gold, who fill their houses with silver. Or like a buried stillborn I'd be, like babes who never saw light. There the wicked cease their troubling, and there the weary repose. Altogether the princes are tranquil. They hear not the taskmaster's voice. The small and the great are there, and the slave is free of his master. Why give light to the wretched and life to the deeply embittered, who wait for death in vain, dig for it more than treasure, who rejoice at the tomb, are glad when they find the grave? To a man whose way is hidden, and God has hedged him about, for before my bread my moaning comes, and my roar pours out like water. For I feared a thing, and it befell me, and what I dreaded came upon me. I was not quiet, I was not still, I had no repose, and trouble came. There's a lot of really great poetry in there, just like quality poetry. What we know about the author of Job, we don't know his name, we don't know when he lived, but we do know that he is a great poet. It's tough for us to know through translation. There's a lot of good poetry in the Bible, in Psalms, in the prophets and things. Job is Shakespeare. He is great poetry. And everybody else is really, really good poetry. Byron and Tennyson and Emily Dickens and whoever else you can think about, Banjo Patterson, whoever you want. I didn't Google Australian poets. Maybe I did. And if you're interested in that, then in 2 Sundays, next Sunday at 5 o'clock, we're going to talk about that. And we'll have some time to go through chapter 3 and some other parts that show just some of the beautiful thing. And I love this translation because it sounds like poetry again to me. But more importantly, this is a chapter that's in the Bible. The Bible does not demand that we have it together, that we understand what's happening to us at all times. A lot of the Old Testament can feel that way at times, where it's very obvious, oh, this is happening because of this, that's happening because of that. But Job stands up and says, no. Life sometimes is really hard, and we don't know why. And Job is sitting in a place where he is near suicidal. He asks that he was never born. He wonders why he wasn't a stillborn. These are really evocative, emotional images that may draw emotion out of you, and they should. That's the point of poetry. That's the point of why he's saying these things. And so maybe you're in a place right now where you identify with that. Or maybe you were in a place where you can identify with that. Job sits in that book with you. He sits with you in this chapter. You're allowed to feel those emotions. You're allowed to not understand what's going on. I find that really comforting and really, really beautiful. And we're going to leave Job with that. We don't have an answer for him right now. In 2 weeks' time, we'll talk about God's answer for it, and God has a really wild answer. And it's not an answer of, oh, here's why I did this, and here's why I did that, and here's how this is going to actually turn out to be a blessing for you. It's an answer of, here's who I am, Will you be in relationship with me? And that's the answer that we all have. Regardless of our situation, regardless of how bad things seem or how good things seem at any given moment, that's the same call that's offered to us at an even more deeper and profound level through the cross, through Jesus Christ. So as we begin this story of Job, be open to the deeper things, the harder questions, the harder sensations of life that maybe you're going through, maybe someone you know is going through. And Jaira made a big deal about all the answers I was going to bring from the book of Job, but I'm going to tell you right now, I don't have any of the answers. I think Job actually complicates things way more, because I think the world and the universe and God is actually way more complicated than we give it credit for. We want answers, and God says you can't even understand the answers. And that's where we are, and that's okay, and that's good. So this is a place where you can experience those feelings. You can be a part of that. You can bring that forward into this community. So be thinking about your own life and how things are going. What has God been teaching you through the good, through the bad? As you're in your journey, maybe you've been a Christian, maybe you've been walking with Jesus for a really long time, and you can go back and you can see seasons, long seasons of good and bad and how that shaped you. Maybe it's brand new for you and you have no idea what's in front of you. Be open to what God has to say through this ancient book, through this poetry that is sometimes weird, sometimes hard to understand. But God is still speaking out to us. He's still calling to us. So the worship team will come as I pray. Father, we're just grateful to you for the stories that you have given to us. For stories like JC, who you showed him through time again and again that you're looking out for him, that you will provide, that you are the great provider. Lord, we're grateful too for the story of Job that can show us how complicated things are. And as we dig into it, as we read some, as we look at some of the poetry and some of the deeper theological, philosophical debate that happens next week, just pray that you would open our hearts to you, to how you see the universe. Lord, that you would call us back to you, that you would sustain us through these things. And Lord, we pray in Jesus' name.